The Salt Lake City International Airport says a man who breached a security door and crawled into a plane's engine has died.
Learning more about the death of a Park City man after he was found inside of a plane engine. We begin tonight with a death at the Salt Lake City International Airport. Investigators are telling us the latest details now about a man they found inside the engine of a commercial airliner.
Right now, it's believed 30-year-old Kyler Effinger of Park City made it past security and reportedly had a plane ticket to fly to Denver.
They had him on video for 4 hours and no one was able to help him. It's just horrifying to see him in the state he's in. It's just clearly manic. So Kyler did come up to Sun Valley for Christmas. Texted on his way home that it was the best Christmas ever. It just shows how fragile this bipolar disorder is. To be the best ever and then dead the next week. It's just a tragedy.
While the rest of the world was ringing in a new year, making resolutions to better themselves and surely hoping for a better year than the year just left behind. Sadly, however, the first day of 2024 for 30-year-old Kyler Effinger would be his last. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder at a young age. To be sure, Kyler has endured a hard life, even as short as it was. But his illness wasn't just hard on Kyler, but his family as well. But a family who never gave up on him and helped him at every turn. From manic episodes to being bullied relentlessly throughout his life for being different. As with millions of other people around the world who struggle with the disorder, Kyler had a rough go of it. But he still fought like hell through every battle and weathered every storm, and somehow managed to thrive many times, as well as suffer through the bad. However, according to his parents and with the right medications, Kyler's father Judd said he's been doing really well the past few years. But before we can get back to the events of that tragic New Year's Day in Salt Lake City, we need to go back just a little bit further. 1 week before, to the week of Christmas 2023. Only a week before his death, Kyler spent Christmas 2023 in Sun Valley with his family. According to his father, it was the best Christmas they have ever had. And his father Judd said that when Kyler left at the end of that week on the way home, Kyler texted his father and his family and told them that he too enjoyed the best Christmas that he had ever had. But right after Christmas 2023, Kyler and his family received some bad news. Kyler's elderly grandfather, after suffering multiple heart attacks and having only 10% of heart function remaining as a result of heart failure, his grandfather was sent home from the hospital right after Christmas so that he would have the chance to pass away peacefully at home among friends and family. When Kyler's father told him about how gravely ill his grandfather had become, Kyler said to his father, "Dad, I have to go see him." At first, Kyler was going to make the long drive from Utah to Colorado. But his father said 9 hours alone in a car for Kyler might just be something that could possibly re-trigger his condition. So in order to avoid his son having to drive and as not to put unneeded stress on Kyler, his father bought him a plane ticket to fly to Denver to say his final goodbyes to his grandfather. Salt Lake City Airport was expected to see over 100,000 passengers that day. and that worried Kyler's father a little. However, a bit later when we go over the entire security video, you will see that the airport looked almost empty that night. Well, except for the people who could have helped save Kyler's life, that is. Kyler had recently embraced a new look, now sporting a new hairstyle, dreadlocks. But also worried about his grandfather's condition, he may have possibly been showing some visible signs of anxiety. So once he reached the security checkpoint, and at that point at least, the TSA was doing their job, and Kyler's possibly anxious appearance attracted their attention. So they pulled him out of the line for some extra screening. And it was that screening that caused Kyler to miss his boarding that fateful New Year's Day. His father said Kyler even called him during his screening and said he felt like they were profiling him specifically, and they were going to make him late for his flight. At least that's how Kyler saw it in his mind. And he was kind of right. However, after a rather lengthy evaluation, eventually TSA let him go to his gate. Now I need to stop here for a second to make sure there's no misunderstanding. Because I need to say that it is not the TSA or airport security or the US government's fault that Kyler was ill. There's no way they could have known, so I get that. However, in a post-9/11 world, especially in the airport where there's more security in security cameras than in a Las Vegas casino, they all watched Tyler break down for more than 4 hours and did nothing to intervene or stop him, if not for the protection of others, at least to protect him from himself when he finally ended up on a runway inside a running Delta Airbus engine. And that point is the reason I wanted to make this particular video. I'm not a mental health professional, nor does the TSA probably have many on staff either. However, the Department of Homeland Security probably should have some mental health professionals on hand at all airports, considering the amount of craziness that goes on airports around the US these days. And I don't negatively use that term, but airports are probably the most stressful places on Earth, causing the most stable people to lose their minds at times. But what if a man like Kyler had other intentions? Not of harming himself, but what if he planned to harm others, as he so easily accessed the runways and the tarmac that night? Where was the firewall to protect everybody else? Well, as it turned out, that point was moot, but if it was, well, you bet that would have been a much bigger story. So with that said, after being held up by TSA, when they finally let him go, it was too late. His flight had already pushed from the gate, and Kyler missed his flight, and the rest is history. Okay, so let's go through the video now, and I'll talk about it as we watch it and see if you can see all the ways during those 4 hours that somebody could have helped save Kyler's life. But not only that, it shows the world how lacking America's airport security is, and I think that's the larger issue in this whole tragic story. Here we see Kyler outside the airport arriving, a normal drop-off, nothing unusual. He heads down the escalator and checks his bags. Next we see where he's pulled aside by TSA. Once TSA releases Kyler, he realizes he's late for the plane, so we see him running to the gate. Probably now panic is beginning to set in because he wants to reach his grandfather before he passes. It's at that moment that he realizes the gate is closed and the plane is now on the de-icing pad. You can see him put his hands on his head, almost watching the wheels in his head spinning, trying to come up with a solution. He knows the plane is still out there, he can see it, he just needs to find a way to get to it. But sadly, now Kyler is in full panic mode. It's at that point that we see him sprint off and start running, confused, not sure what to do. By this point in the video, he now has had 4 hours of sheer panic, which his mind has had to race in all directions. It was during this time that he called and texted his father for help. His dad tried to reassure Kyler and calm him down, knowing his son and what this could do to him. So his father tried to find another flight, and he did. Kyler was going to fly to a different Denver area airport and drive the rest of the way. But as I mentioned, Kyler spent more than 4 hours in that airport running around acting strange, the whole time basically freaking out. But here is where I want you to notice not one airport police officer, TSA agent, Delta employee, or any airport professional working in that airport during those 4 hours, on that video at least, reaches out to him to see if they could help. I understand the average person these days being leery of approaching a stranger because, let's face it, that usually ends badly. Still, not one person approached him for the entire time since his meltdown began. It's really sad that TSA, airport security, and Homeland Security were all asleep at the switch. After all, what are they there for? Yeah, for our protection. Yet while no one needed protection from Kyler, everybody else didn't know that. And this is where the story takes a real turn for the horrifying as far as I'm concerned. No, not for the final result, but the fact that the entire airport security staff, well, not all of them, some were on a coffee break. But according to the airport security chief, they had him on the monitors the entire time, and nobody, as you can plainly see, nobody approached him or even apprehended him or tried to question him. But at this point in the security video, you can see the poor guy's in full meltdown mode, so he approaches the Delta gate trying to force the door open, and that doesn't work, and he falls down. Then he takes his shoes off in a vain attempt and throws them at the glass to try and break it so he can run out and catch his plane that he can still plainly see. And yet every airport staffer just watches and kind of ignores him. Plus, how many police or security officers do you see in this ghost town of a so-called busy, safe airport on one of the busiest travel days of the year? Yeah, pretty much exactly zero. If they were there, we don't see him on security video. Yet they said they had him on the monitors the whole time. Not only that, but in interviews, the chief of security said they did everything correctly to keep a threat from inside the airport from getting loose on the runways, except the part where they didn't. Here you can see a janitor kind of just stare at him as he melts down. Yeah, I know, what's he supposed to do? Finally, Kyler found the emergency door, and when it was open, an alarm sounded. Again later in a news interview, the director of security bragged that we were able to get him in 10 minutes. That's like a badge of honor. 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a lifetime. You can do a lot of damage in 10 minutes. You know what? Let me rephrase that. 10 minutes was literally Kyler's lifetime. So as the security video ends, now free of the confines of the airport terminal, Kyler has one goal. He has to catch that plane to make it to Grandpa before he dies, which causes Kyler's worst breakdown of his life. So while apparently shedding his clothes in the dead of winter because he was probably sweating profusely as he races towards the plane on the de-icing pad, still all the while in his mind thinking he can enter the plane. Maybe even thinking the engine would be away inside. Still not a police car in sight on the runway. It took the pilot to radio the control tower to tell them there's a man running on the runway. But by the time the pilot was told to shut down the engines, it was too late. But in the end, of course, Kyle Effinger's new year, and every year he had left after that, was over in an instant. Yet when the news first broke back in January, all the rest of the world just read on the internet was that a man climbed in an engine and died. But there was so much more to the story. However, I do question the premise of this entire story. Because did Kyler really just climb into the engine? The media, Delta, the airport, and the TSA at first all reported that Kyler simply climbed into the engine. However, I 100% disagree. I argue he was sucked in as the engines were spooling down. Because the first reports that came out from both Delta and the airport said the engines were not running at the time, and they stressed that point. However, when the infrared security footage came out, you could clearly see the heat signature of the still running or at least spooling down engines. So did Kyler just jump in an engine? No. But in the big picture, that doesn't change the outcome very much. Because Kyler was still in a very dangerous place he shouldn't have been, both on the runway and in his mind. It was about 1 a.m. when Kyler's groggy parents and family were awakened by red and blue flashing lights outside their window, followed by the obligatory cop knock at the front door. It was then that the sheriff gave them the news that no parents ever want to hear. The next day, Kyler's father, Judd, spoke to local news reporters.
The police came and knocked on our door at 1 o'clock at night to give us the news that no parents ever want to hear. It's been the hardest 36 hours of our lives, I'm sure. Yeah, just a really good soul. Friendly, outgoing, and caring.
We first found out about his bipolar disorder probably 10 years ago. He had his first major manic episode, and then he kind of continued to have those every 2 or 3 years for the past 10 years. And they were always really hard.
You know, he got held up in security, missed his flight, and those phone calls I just knew, you know, they call it the manic phase. And, you know, those just don't end well for him. And, you know, this one, obviously, worst ever. Well, we just had this really special visit with him at Christmas. You know, on the outside, it seemed like it was as good as he's ever been.
Despite all of our encouragement to him to seek help and get into therapy and try to address his disorder head on, he was always reluctant to do that because of the bullying he had endured.
Other parents and families that are going through this is to not self-medicate, you know, to seek professional doctors, seek professional therapists.
The Effingers hope that sharing Kyler's struggles help raise awareness about the challenges of dealing with mental health, and so do I. Oh, and one last sad, well, I guess not sad, but ironic for sure. Apparently, Kyler's grandfather is a tough old bird because even with a 10% chance of survival, Tyler's grandfather is still alive and hanging on. Too bad Kyler couldn't have known that. So in case you saw the story in January and never heard the rest of the story, now you know the full, real and true story of the man in the engine. Let me know what you think. Am I wrong? Is the system broken? Or was this just a sad one-off incident? Or could we all do better as a society? Especially because security and airport employees have done more for Kyler. So please be sure and let me know down below. And as you all know, those likes drive the algorithm. So if you liked the video, please hit that thumbs up button. And while you're there, you can subscribe too if you haven't yet. And as always, thanks for watching. And until next time, yeah, this is Maximus.